In the heart of the vast countryside lay Joao's farm, a property that looked like it had been taken from an ancient tale. With its extensive fields where wheat gently danced in the wind and a barn that held stories from many generations, the place exuded a rustic and timeless charm. The setting was completed by wooden fences that snaked through the hills and an old windmill that still worked, adding a gentle, constant melody to the ambience, which mingled with the chirping of birds at dawn. Despite the tranquility that the rural environment offered, a subtle layer of mystery seemed to hover over the farm. It was as if every tree and every trail held ancient secrets, whispered only to those who dared to listen carefully. This mystery gave the property an almost magical aura, making every shadow and every evening light seem to tell a veiled story. In the midst of this picturesque setting, Joao, the owner of the farm, moved with an energy that contrasted with the calm of the place. A man with features marked by time and the sun, Joao knew every piece of his land as if it were part of himself. He was aware that the days were becoming longer and the tasks more arduous, indicating that it was time to find a new pair of hands to help with the daily work. In this search, Joao placed an ad in the local newspaper, calling on interested parties to apply for a job on the farm. The expectation of bringing someone new to the place brought a mixture of anxiety and hope. Joao knew that each person who set foot on those lands brought with them new energy, and perhaps new secrets. When the day arrived to receive the candidates, Joao rose with the sun, walked along the gravel path that led to the large farmhouse and looked thoughtfully at the horizon. He hoped to find someone who not only shared his love of the countryside, but who would also bring new vigor to the farm's routine, which was about to take on new chapters with the arrival of autumn. As the sun reached its peak, a figure approached in the distance, raising a light dust on the dirt road that cut through the cornfields. He was a man of strong build, with a determined walk and a look that seemed to hide more than he revealed. As he approached, Joao felt a strange sensation, a premonition that made him frown, intrigued by the unfamiliar familiarity of the one walking towards the farm. This encounter, although simple at first glance, was about to trigger a series of events that would change life on the farm irrevocably. Joao, still without knowing it, was on the threshold of discovering that the arrival of this new employee would be the beginning of a journey full of discoveries and profound revelations, both for him and for everyone involved in the quiet and mysterious life of the farm. On that sunny morning, Joao's farm sparkled under an impeccably blue sky. The sun's rays broke through the morning dew that covered the fields, creating a spectacle of light and color that announced the beginning of a new day. It was in this idyllic setting that the new employee was about to make his entrance, a figure that brought with him an air of mystery as palpable as the breeze that gently moved the leaves of the farm's ancient trees. In the distance, a robust silhouette stood out against the sun-golden landscape. The man walked with firm steps towards the farmhouse, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and a reserved expression that revealed little about his thoughts or their origin. His posture was that of someone who had traveled long distances, but who carried his story as easily as he carried his luggage. Joao, who was waiting for him on the porch, watched the new employee's approach with a mix of expectation and caution. Dressed simply but suitable for work in the field, Joao extended a robust, calloused hand to meet the strangers, in a greeting that sealed more than a work agreement. It was a welcoming gesture to a new chapter in farm life. The presentations were brief. "Welcome. I'm Joao, the owner of the farm. You must be Mr. Gabriel, correct?" said Joao, trying to decipher the enigmatic look of the man in front of him. "Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity," replied Gabriel in a voice that carried a subtle but noticeable weight of past experience. His speech was measured, revealing little more than necessary, and maintaining the air of mystery that seemed like a second skin to him. It was then that Joao noticed the watch on Gabriel's wrist. It wasn't just any watch. Its aged silver case and intricately crafted dial spoke of a bygone era, and the way Gabriel occasionally ran his finger over it suggested a sentimental value that went beyond the material. Joao felt a wave of surprise mixed with an unsettling curiosity. "That's a nice watch," he commented, trying not to seem too intrigued. Gabriel glanced at his wrist, and for a brief moment, his reserved expression gave way to a glimmer of vulnerability. "It was a family gift," he explained succinctly, before quickly changing the subject. "I'm looking forward to getting to work and learning more about the farm." As Gabriel followed Joao around the farm, introducing work areas and discussing responsibilities, the watch remained on the new employee's wrist, swinging slightly with each movement. It was a constant reminder that each person carries hidden stories with them. And on that sunny day, the shadows of those stories began to stretch across Joao's peaceful farm, promising to unravel mysteries that could change everything he thought he knew about his world and the people he lived in. They entered it. When Joao saw the watch on Gabriel's wrist, it was as if time had stopped for an instant. The sunlight reflected off the polished metal of the accessory, highlighting it in an almost hypnotic way. The watch, with its antique and sophisticated design, had a delicately crafted dial, showing signs of use but still in perfect working order. The sight of the object brought back a wave of memories that Joao did not expect to relive. His countenance, once warm and welcoming, changed abruptly. His skin lost its color and he felt his blood run cold. Joao knew that that watch was not a common item. It was the same watch that his brother Miguel wore before he mysteriously disappeared years ago. That accessory was a family heirloom, passed down from generation to generation, until Miguel inherited it. Since Miguel's disappearance, the watch seemed to have disappeared with him, and seeing it now, on Gabriel's wrist, was like a ghostly vision, bringing back a flood of emotions and unanswered questions. Trying to control the tremor in his hands and the paleness that now took over his face, Joao tried to disguise his shock with a forced smile and a casual comment. "An interesting watch. It seems to have a story," he said, trying hard to keep his voice steady. However, his attempt to hide his disturbance was flawed. Sweat was beginning to form on his forehead and his breathing was becoming shorter and shorter. Every beat of his heart seemed to echo in his head, as he tried to understand how that object so full of meaning had ended up there. Joao's uneasiness was evident, and although Gabriel didn't seem to notice initially, the tension in the air was undeniable. Joao began to mentally question how Gabriel could have gotten that watch. Was Miguel alive? Did Gabriel know more than he was saying? Possibilities swirled in his mind, and the need for answers became overwhelming. Feeling the pressure increase, Joao realized he needed a moment to compose himself. With an abrupt movement, Joao apologized and retreated into the house, claiming he needed to check something quickly. His steps were quick and uncoordinated, almost tripping over a porch step. Once inside, he leaned against the hallway wall, closing his eyes and trying to regulate his breathing. He felt disoriented, as if he were on the verge of an emotional breakdown. The sight of the clock had awakened ghosts from the past that he was not prepared to face. Joao tried to rationalize the situation. Perhaps the watch had been sold or lost somehow and Gabriel had acquired it without knowing its history. However, the coincidence seemed too big to ignore. Joao felt that there was something more at stake, something he needed to discover. He knew he needed to face Gabriel and find out the truth, but right now, he needed a moment to collect his thoughts and feelings. After a few minutes, Joao returned to the open air, where Gabriel was waiting patiently. Trying to regain a more relaxed posture, Joao smiled again, albeit tensely, and tried to resume the conversation where they had left off. However, the dynamics had changed irreversibly. The clock continued to tick as a constant reminder of Joao's past, and he knew that, one way or another, he would have to deal with the whirlwind of emotions and secrets that small object had brought back to the surface. In the silence of Joao's office, the soft afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows on the walls. The room was filled with an almost reverent stillness, interrupted only by the occasional sound of leaves rustling in the wind outside. Joao, sitting at his antique mahogany desk, was lost in thought, his eyes fixed on an indistinct point in the air. The watch he had seen on Gabriel's wrist never left his mind, as if it were engraved there, pulsing with its own energy. The object, a pocket watch with a silver chain, was an artifact of the brothers' family history. It had belonged to his grandfather, passed from generation to generation until it reached Miguel, Joao's older brother. Miguel had always been the family favorite, charismatic and adventurous, and the watch seemed a perfect symbol of his personality. Remembering the clock was remembering Miguel. The sound of his laughter, his stories of bravery and his grandiose plans. But all of this had dissolved into the air, like smoke, the day Miguel disappeared without a trace. Miguel's disappearance had been a devastating blow for João and his family. For months, they desperately searched for any clues, but the mystery remained unfathomable. The watch, which Miguel always wore, was also gone, and its absence became a dark symbol of an inexplicable loss. The last time the watch was seen, it was on Miguel's wrist, and seeing it again, years later, on a stranger's arm, was like a ghostly blow, bringing back all the pain and unanswered questions. As these memories flooded his mind, John felt a mix of emotions: deep sadness, confusion, and a growing uneasiness. He wondered how the watch, an object so closely linked to his brother, had ended up with Gabriel. Would it have been sold? Lost? Or was there something darker and more complex going on? The questions tormented him, and he found himself struggling to maintain clarity of thought amid the emotional turmoil that engulfed him. João tried to concentrate, analyzing the possible scenarios. If Gabriel had acquired the watch through legitimate means, why would he be on the farm now, working as an employee? The watch could be the key to solving the mystery of Miguel's disappearance, but it could also open doors to secrets that João was not prepared to face. The prospect of answers that could both ease and intensify his pain was something João couldn't ignore. The office, with its shelves of books and antiques, suddenly seemed like a place filled with heavy memories. João got up and walked to a small showcase where he kept family heirlooms. Among them was an old photo of Miguel, smiling, with the same watch on his wrist. João took the photo and looked at it, feeling the weight of memories oppressing his chest. Miguel's face seemed to look at him, as if asking for help in solving the mystery of his disappearance. Determined to find answers, João knew he needed to speak more deeply with Gabriel. The watch wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a link to his lost brother, a possible fragment of a story still incomplete. With a heavy heart, but with renewed resolve, João decided that he would not rest until he discovered the truth about how that clock, and possibly Miguel, had gotten there. Determined to discover the truth about the mysterious watch, João decided to face the situation head-on. The next day, he invited Gabriel for a more in-depth conversation in the comfort of the farmhouse's living room, a cozy environment with dark wood furniture and a fireplace that warmed the space. The atmosphere was peaceful, but tension hung in the air like a cloud about to dissipate. Gabriel, sitting in an armchair, looked a little uncomfortable, but maintained a calm and collected expression. João started the conversation with a soft approach, trying to create an atmosphere of trust. Gabriel, since you arrived, I have noticed that you are a reserved but hard-working person. He began, measuring his words carefully. However, something has intrigued me deeply, and I feel I need to clarify. The watch you wear, it has a particular story for me. João looked directly into Gabriel's eyes, hoping to catch any reaction that might betray the clock's origins. Gabriel, realizing the direction of the conversation, sighed and straightened up in the armchair. I understand, Mr. João. Maybe it's time to clarify some things. With a calm tone of voice, he began to narrate his story. Gabriel revealed that his real name was Tomás, and that the name Gabriel was a pseudonym he used to avoid a complicated situation in his past. João was momentarily surprised, but encouraged Tomás to continue, feeling that they were finally getting somewhere. Tomás explained that the watch had belonged to his uncle, a man he described as an adventurer with many secrets. This uncle, according to Tomás, had recently passed away, leaving him a few possessions, including the watch. He always told me stories about the places he visited and the people he met, said Tomás, with a note of nostalgia in his voice. When he died, I found the watch among his things, and as a reminder of him, I decided to wear it. The revelation brought a mixture of relief and concern to João. Relief because, until that moment, he feared that the watch could be linked to something more sinister. But the uneasiness came from the new layer of mystery about how Miguel, his missing brother's watch, had ended up in the hands of Tomás' uncle. João asked directly if Tomás knew how his uncle had gotten the watch, but Tomás shook his head, uncertain. "My uncle never talked much about where he got his things," he confessed. He was a man of few words when it came to business. João felt a mix of emotions. The hope of finding a clue about his brother was mixed with the fear of never getting clear answers. He asked Tomás if his uncle had mentioned Miguel or if he had talked about any specific event that could explain his possession of the watch. Tomás reflected for a moment, but was unable to provide concrete information. "My uncle was always a mysterious man. Maybe he knew more than he said," concluded Tomás with a tone of regret. The conversation left João thoughtful. Although he had discovered Tomás' true identity and a possible clue as to the whereabouts of the watch, many questions still remained unanswered. However, Tomás' honesty and his complex life story awakened a feeling of empathy in João. He knew that the next step would be to investigate further, perhaps even revisit places and people from the past that could shed light on the enigma surrounding the Miguel's disappearance and the mysterious watch. As night fell, João and Tomás ended their conversation with a mutual sense of respect and understanding. The clock, a small silver relic, glowed softly in the light of the room, serving as a constant reminder of the unresolved past that both men, in different ways, were now determined to unravel. Determined to discover the truth behind the clock and the mystery that surrounded it, João began investigating Tomás's past with renewed determination. He knew that unraveling this story could bring answers about the disappearance of his brother Miguel, an enigma that had haunted him for years. João began his search for the old records of the farm and the neighboring city, examining documents, newspapers, and files that could provide some clue about the connection between Tomás and his uncle with Miguel. The first few days of the investigation were slow and frustrating. João searched public records but found little information about Tomás or his family. However, he was not discouraged. He began visiting places his brother frequented and talked to old friends and acquaintances. On one of these visits, he met with Dona Marta, an elderly woman and family friend, who had a remarkably sharp memory for past events. She vaguely mentioned having heard of a man who matched Tomás's uncle's description, an adventurer who sometimes traded unusual items. This clue led João to an old antique store, a discreet location in the neighboring town, where the owner, Mr. Alfredo, was known for his knowledge of rare objects and their stories. Mr. Alfredo, a man with sharp eyes and gray hair, remembered a visitor from many years ago who carried a peculiar watch. "It was a very distinguished watch, and the man who brought it was clearly nervous," said Alfredo as he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. João felt a shiver when he heard this, recognizing the description of Miguel's watch. João began to realize that there was a network of subtle connections between Tomás's family and his brother's story. He discovered that Tomás's uncle, named Ricardo, was known for doing business with a variety of people, often acquiring objects without asking much about their origins. This began to clarify how Miguel's watch could have passed into Ricardo's hands, but João was still without answers about what exactly had happened to Miguel. In his search, João also found references to Miguel's name in records of old hotels and inns, where he apparently stayed shortly before disappearing. These records indicated that Miguel was involved in some unknown activity, possibly investigating or following something or someone. The connection with Tomás's uncle began to look like more than a mere coincidence, suggesting that Miguel might have crossed paths with Ricardo at some critical moment. As more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, João realized that Tomás's past was deeply intertwined with Miguel's disappearance. He found old correspondence between Ricardo and an anonymous contact, discussing a special merchandise that needed to be moved discreetly. João began to suspect that this correspondence could be related to the watch or something even more significant that Miguel had discovered. With these discoveries, John knew he was getting closer to the truth. He felt he needed to confront Tomás with this new information to understand Ricardo's, and possibly Tomás's, role in this whole story. The connection that João found not only brought to light the mystery of his brother's disappearance, but also revealed the complex web of secrets and intrigues that surrounded Tomás's life. The final revelation was approaching, and John was determined to find the answers he and his family had been searching for so long. Determined to face the truths that were beginning to emerge, João decided it was time to have a direct and straightforward conversation with Tomás. He chose a discreet spot on the farm, a small grove of old trees that offered shade and privacy, away from the prying ears of the other employees. The setting, with its natural tranquility, contrasted with the tension that João felt as he prepared for the confrontation. The distant sound of the wind in the leaves was the only noise as João awaited Tomás' arrival. When Tomás finally appeared, João invited him to sit on a rustic wooden bench. The atmosphere was charged with expectation and silence. João started the conversation directly, without preamble. "Tomás, I need to talk to you about something very serious. The watch you wear has a story that you may not know, but that is very important to me." He paused, watching Tomás' reactions, who now seemed intrigued, but also cautious. Tomás, noticing the gravity in João's tone, nodded slowly, encouraging him to continue. João then revealed what he had discovered during his investigation, detailing how the watch belonged to his brother Miguel, who had mysteriously disappeared. "That watch was the last thing we saw of my brother before he disappeared. Finding it with you raised many questions and brought back many painful memories." John's words carried an emotional weight that was impossible to ignore. Tomás's face turned pale when he heard João's story. He looked at the watch on his wrist, as if he were seeing it for the first time. I didn't know," he stammered, visibly shaken. "I only learned that my uncle, Ricardo, left me this along with other things when he passed away. He never mentioned where the watch came from or the story behind it." The sincerity in Tomás's voice was palpable, but João couldn't help but feel frustrated by the lack of concrete answers. João, still fighting the avalanche of emotions, asked directly if Tomás knew anything about Miguel's disappearance or if Ricardo could be involved in some way. Tomás, regaining some of his composure, denied any knowledge of the matter. "My uncle was a private man with many secrets. He told me the watch was valuable, but he never explained why. Now I see there was much more to it than I could have imagined." The conversation became even more tense when João, in an effort to obtain more information, asked if Tomás knew of any contacts of Ricardo's that could clarify the situation. Tomás, apparently lost in thought, tried to remember something useful, but his answers were limited and uncertain. "I wish I could help more, John," he said sincerely. "But it seems my uncle took a lot of secrets with him." With the discussion approaching an impasse, João felt divided. On the one hand, Tomás seemed genuinely ignorant of any involvement in anything nefarious. On the other, the coincidence of the clock and Ricardo's silence were difficult to ignore. João decided he needed more time to process everything and investigate further. He ended the conversation with a request that Tomás remain available for further questions, should new information emerge. While Tomás left, still visibly disturbed, João remained in the woods, contemplating his next move. He knew that although this conversation hadn't provided all the answers, it had at least established a basis of understanding. João was more determined than ever to discover the truth about Miguel's disappearance and the role that, directly or indirectly, Ricardo and Tomás could have played. The atmosphere on the farm was filled with palpable tension as João and Tomás prepared to confront the secrets of their past. Days after the conversation in the woods, new facts began to emerge, shedding a disturbing light on what was really at stake. João delved deeper into his investigations, while Tomás, feeling the increasing pressure, began to uncover secrets he had kept throughout his life. With each new revelation, it became clear that the story was more complex than either of them could have imagined. On a silent afternoon, as they walked through the farm's fields, Tomás decided to come clean with João. "I wasn't completely honest with you about my past," he began, his voice carrying a visible weight. "The watch wasn't just left to me by my uncle Ricardo. There's a deeper story he told me just before he died." Tomás revealed that Ricardo had been involved in shady dealings, dealing with smuggling valuable artifacts. The watch, according to Ricardo, was part of a collection that he had acquired in ways that were not exactly legal. This revelation fell like a bombshell for João. The watch, which he had always associated with Miguel's disappearance, now seemed to be linked to a world of illegality and dark secrets. My uncle never told me where exactly the items he had came from, but he mentioned that they were of great value and that people often didn't ask questions when they wanted to sell something quickly. Tomas continued, visibly shaken. He also mentioned that Ricardo had found the watch under mysterious circumstances, suggesting that it could have belonged to someone trying to hide or get away from something. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, João realized that Miguel's disappearance could be connected to something much bigger than a simple personal disappearance. He began to question whether Miguel might have inadvertently become involved with Ricardo's activities, or whether he was investigating these dealings on his own. The idea that Miguel could have discovered something dangerous and been silenced for it began to emerge in João's mind, bringing a new layer of urgency to his search for answers. Tomas, in turn, began to remember fragments of conversations he had heard as a child, while living with his uncle. He recalled that Ricardo often mentioned a problematic customer who insisted on knowing more about the origins of the items he purchased. João immediately associated this description with Miguel, who had always been curious and determined in his investigations. The possibility that Miguel was trying to uncover Ricardo's smuggling network and that this could have led to his disappearance became an alarming but plausible hypothesis. However, the situation was even more complex. Tomas revealed that, after Ricardo's death, he had found a series of hidden letters that mentioned secret meetings and illicit transactions. The letters referenced several artifacts, including the clock, as being part of a lot that needed to be moved quickly. The discovery of these letters gave João a concrete clue to follow and opened a new line of investigation into the possible people involved and the reasons that could have led to Miguel's disappearance. As these discoveries unfolded, João and Tomas realized that they were dealing with a much wider and more dangerous web of secrets than they had anticipated. The revelations not only changed the way João viewed his brother's disappearance, but also put Tomas in a delicate position, confronting uncomfortable truths about his own family. Both knew they needed to proceed with caution, as the stakes were more than just finding answers. It was a matter of justice and shedding light on a dark chapter in their lives. With the new information in hand, João and Tomas were more determined than ever to discover the whole truth. The tension was at its peak, and they knew that the next step would be crucial to unearth all the secrets and finally understand what really happened to Miguel and how the clock, now a symbol of mystery and danger, fit into this whole story. As João and Tomas continued to uncover the secrets of the past, they finally reached the crucial point of the story, the truth about Miguel's disappearance. The clues gathered throughout the investigation led us to an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where they discovered more documents and items related to the smuggling in which Ricardo was involved. It was there, amid boxes of artifacts and papers yellowed by time, that the complete story began to unfold. Miguel, it seemed, had come across Ricardo's smuggling network while investigating suspicious activities in the region. Always curious and with a strong sense of justice, Miguel began asking questions and following clues that led him closer and closer to the illegal scheme. Documents found in the warehouse revealed that Miguel had infiltrated Ricardo's operations, pretending to be a buyer interested in discovering the truth about the origin of the artifacts. However, what began as a personal investigation quickly turned dangerous. Miguel discovered that Ricardo was not acting alone. There were other powerful figures involved, including influential people in the local community. These discoveries placed Miguel in a delicate and dangerous position. He began gathering evidence and planned to expose the scheme, but his investigation did not go unnoticed. Ricardo's letters indicated that he was aware of Miguel's true identity and intentions, and this placed him in a situation of imminent risk. The turning point occurred when Miguel decided to confront Ricardo with the evidence he had collected. Hoping to force Ricardo to confess and perhaps put an end to his illegal activities, Miguel found him one fateful night. However, the situation quickly got out of control. According to the letters and testimonies collected, a heated argument broke out between the two. Ricardo, fearing for his safety and the risk of being exposed, reacted impulsively. Amidst the chaos, a tragic accident occurred. Miguel fell and suffered a fatal injury. Tomas, reading the letters for the first time with João, was shocked to discover that his uncle had not intentionally killed Miguel, but neither had he sought help. Instead, a panicked Ricardo covered up the incident, hiding Miguel's body and forging documents to allay suspicion. He then spread rumors that Miguel had fled after being falsely accused of being involved in smuggling, ensuring that the case was quickly hushed up. The truth, now revealed, was a web of tragedies and misunderstandings. Miguel had been an unsung hero, trying to dismantle a criminal network, but ended up becoming a victim of his own quest for justice. Ricardo, out of fear and desperation, chose a path of silence and concealment, resulting in years of pain and uncertainty for Joao's family. Tomas, in turn, was caught in the middle of a legacy of guilt and secrets that he never fully knew. Until that moment, John, devastated by the revelations, felt a mixture of relief at finally knowing the truth and deep sadness at the loss of his brother and the suffering that followed. The discovery that Miguel died trying to do good has shed new light on his character, but the fact that his death was the result of a series of tragic events and misunderstandings has only added to the weight of Joao's grief. Now, with the truth exposed, he and Tomas faced the difficult task of dealing with the fallout and seeking some kind of closure for everyone involved. As Joao and Tomas continued to uncover the secrets of the past, they finally reached the crucial point of the story: the truth about Miguel's disappearance. The clues gathered throughout the investigation led us to an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, where they discovered more documents and items related to the smuggling in which Ricardo was involved. It was there, amid boxes of artifacts and papers yellowed by time, that the complete story began to unfold. Miguel, it seemed, had come across Ricardo's smuggling network while investigating suspicious activities in the region. Always curious and with a strong sense of justice, Miguel began asking questions and following clues that led him closer and closer to the illegal scheme. Documents found in the warehouse revealed that Miguel had infiltrated Ricardo's operations, pretending to be a buyer interested in discovering the truth about the origin of the artifacts. However, what began as a personal investigation quickly turned dangerous. Miguel discovered that Ricardo was not acting alone. There were other powerful figures involved, including influential people in the local community. These discoveries placed Miguel in a delicate and dangerous position. He began gathering evidence and planned to expose the scheme, but his investigation did not go unnoticed. Ricardo's letters indicated that he was aware of Miguel's true identity and intentions, and this placed him in a situation of imminent risk. The turning point occurred when Miguel decided to confront Ricardo with the evidence he had collected. Hoping to force Ricardo to confess and perhaps put an end to his illegal activities, Miguel found him one fateful night. However, the situation quickly got out of control. According to the letters and testimonies collected, a heated argument broke out between the two. Ricardo, fearing for his safety and the risk of being exposed, reacted impulsively. Amidst the chaos, a tragic accident occurred. Miguel fell and suffered a fatal injury. Tomas, reading the letters for the first time with Joao, was shocked to discover that his uncle had not intentionally killed Miguel, but neither had he sought help. Instead, a panicked Ricardo covered up the incident, hiding Miguel's body and forging documents to allay suspicion. He then spread rumors that Miguel had fled after being falsely accused of being involved in smuggling, ensuring that the case was quickly hushed up. The truth, now revealed, was a web of tragedies and misunderstandings. Miguel had been an unsung hero, trying to dismantle a criminal network, but ended up becoming a victim of his own quest for justice. Ricardo, out of fear and desperation, chose a path of silence and concealment, resulting in years of pain and uncertainty for Joao's family. Tomas, in turn, was caught in the middle of a legacy of guilt and secrets that he never fully knew. Until that moment, John, devastated by the revelations, felt a mixture of relief at finally knowing the truth and deep sadness at the loss of his brother and the suffering that followed. The discovery that Miguel died trying to do good has shed new light on his character, but the fact that his death was the result of a series of tragic events and misunderstandings has only added to the weight of Joao's grief. Now, with the truth exposed, he and Tomas faced the difficult task of dealing with the fallout and seeking some kind of closure for everyone involved.